Care about the message of Christ? Heck no. Constantine worshipped Mithra. As a matter of fact, he had a over 30-foot statue commissioned to be built of himself as the god Mithra. And when you look up the history of the god Mithra, he is portrayed as the pagan Christ.
Hey, wait a second. Didn't the word Mithra also involve the word myth? Is there any etymological kind of significance there?
You would certainly think so.
Sorry, continue.
So here you have essentially the church adopted Christianity, but all they did was give Christian names to the existing pagan holidays. It's an extension of the church. The Church of Rome is basically the old religion of Rome in its Mithra worshiping days, and they took Mithra worship and they kept their holidays and gave them Christian names. And they got they paid off the ruling class to buy into it. When they got the Bible, do you think they wanted anybody to know what was written in the scriptures? Especially, you have Mithra worshipers, and now they're adopting a large part of the Hebrew canon, the Hebrew holy text, including the most sacred books, the Torah. And you're making that part of your religion? A bunch of Mithra worshipers are going to convert to Christianity? Yeah, you guys hold on to that dream. Go research every holiday the church holds, and it has a pagan origin, which can be traced right back to guess where? Ancient Samaria. Almost every world empire still celebrates the same holy days as the Anunnaki invented for us back in Samaria. How about that? How about that? So it's the same repetitive nonsense by the same alien or extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, which have kidnapped us. Now, I keep on going back to that kidnapping. Let's take a look at this real quick. We've got 2 new life forms. Perfect DNA. Perfect. And when you examine the account, they're living together, they're naked, and they're happy. And then the serpent comes along and says, hey, eat this fruit. You'll be just like God. You see, they were children of God, and it's like fish. How does a fish know it's wet? Once it gets out of the water, it realizes, hey, I'm wet. I'd rather be back in the water. How did they know that? They got to know something's just like God, but they already were God-like. They weren't going to die. They had perfect DNA. They communicated with God on a daily basis, according to the scriptures. At least Adam did. And so now they eat this fruit. They're very comfortable before eating the fruit being naked together. But after they eat the fruit, we're naked. And then they hear the voice of God. And they become afraid. And they hide themselves. And God says, well, why are you hiding? And I said, well, we were naked and we were afraid that, wait a minute, who told you were naked? Did you eat from the fruit? Now, you see, you go back to this proverbial fruit here. And could the fruit have contained a virus which erased part of the human genome, erased part of the DNA, the part that would bring it all together to make it complete? I asked a genetic engineer that one time. A girl who just got out of college, she had a dual master's degree. One of them was in genetic engineering. Biochemistry and genetic engineering is what her 2 majors were. And I asked her, is it possible to figure out if that genetic code ever existed? Or is it, could it have been erased? Is there any way of telling? Could it have been erased? And she thought about it. She said, no. We could very well have had some of our genetic code erased and there'd be no way of telling. And so, could a virus do that? Yeah, it sure could. Don't eat from that fruit. It'll kill you. Why was the fruit put there? You got to ask the people who kidnapped us. Because once that connection was broken, once the DNA was broken, it's interesting, some things that were said, God gets upset. He turns to the serpent. He says, you do this? And the serpent, was like, he says, because you did this thing, you're going to crawl on your belly on the dust of the ground. And your seed, and this is interesting, this is the first prophecy of the Bible. It says, I will put enmity between your seed and the woman's seed and yours. And your seed will bruise him in the head, but your seed will bruise him in the heel, but her seed will bruise you in the head, your seed in the head. And this is the first biblical prophecy. But the woman's seed, the serpent seed, what is this? 2 genetic lines, 2 different strains of DNA? Is that why reptilian shapeshifters are ruling over us? And that's why they interbreed, to keep the serpent seed pure, to keep that cold-blooded, maniacal, I'll kill anybody, anywhere, anytime, and even eat my own young. That serpent seed. And then you have the woman's seed, caring, loving, giving, motherly. Someone you want to cuddle when you are upset with. I don't care how old you are, mom's mom. But when you were a child, mom was your refuge. So these 2 genetic lines were talked about. Again, back to genes. You can't understand this unless you know genetics. So we have these 2 seeds with us today. Now, most of us have a good 50-50 blend of each. However, those of us with more of the woman seed are more likely to wake up. Not only that, but we can mentally change our own DNA. So the more you focus on the good, the positive, and the loving things, the more your DNA will change that way. Your brain will fire more synapses in that direction. It'll create new neurological paths, and you'll be focused more on a doing good type paradigm as opposed to murder and mayhem. So we can change or influence our own DNA. Now, where does that bring us today? We have some people waking up, some people never wake up. But let's go back and let's look. What was the prime directive? God said, let us make man in our image. Us, our, plural. Who was being talked to? Well, obviously, God was talking to the genetic engineers. He said, okay, you guys got the design, but let's make man in our image. What's the image of God? What is the image of Yahweh? It is in our soul and the purity of light which we reflect. How we interact with others. Are we there to help others? Are we there as loving individuals? Now, here's an interesting thing. Before they ate the fruit, they were comfortable being together. After they ate the fruit, they took flight. They were frightened. Now, the mind, or I should say the brain, has 4 operating speeds to it. Beta, which is where fight and flight reside. It is the reactionary part of our operating system, and our brain cycles somewhere between 16 to 22 cycles per second in beta. Then there's alpha. Alpha is where we have to go to meditate or pray. Interestingly enough, if you're making love, most likely you're an alpha. If you're relaxing and daydreaming, you're an alpha. The next step down is theta. Theta. And in theta, you are at a state of meditation where you now can visualize and see things clearly, and you can start to see, or what is called remote view. You can send your consciousness beyond the 3rd dimension. When your brain slows down even slower and goes into delta, this is where people report having out-of-body experiences. Interestingly enough, I was in a coma, and while in a coma, I heard a voice. It said, "Come with me." And I was actually in one part of New York in a hospital in a coma, and I was instantly transported to another part of New York, and I'm watching the birth of my youngest child. I was watching it like I was at the ceiling looking down, watching the birth. And who was that said, "Come with me"? Now, interestingly enough, when I came out of the coma, my mom was standing over me. And the first words out of my mouth were, "Ma, call so-and-so, she had the baby." And my mother looked at me like, Son, I know you just came out of a coma. What's wrong with you? But she had the most confused look on her face. And she said, okay. And she went. She left. I passed back out. Next time I opened my eyes, my mother was standing there again. And she said, congratulations, you have a son. Come with me. And I got to see it. And when I came to, I told her to make the phone call. I also had what's called a near-death experience. And this is interesting. No one has the same experience. Whoever has a near-death experience, there are no two near-death experiences the same. Everybody gets a different little message. When I died, I was in the process of dying. I was being wheeled down a hospital corridor on a gurney, and I couldn't move. I could only move my eyes, and I know I was in trouble, and I know I was dying. I could see a doctor, and I could see nurses around me, and I couldn't tell them that something was wrong and I was dying. And the next, and I can see the ceiling and them, and everything's in color. And the next second, I'm looking down at them wheeling me away on a gurney, and everything's in black and white. And I can feel myself being pulled away from my body. And my life didn't flash before my eyes, but I was upset. I was angry. I was in a state of, I wouldn't say terror, but I didn't want to die, and I knew I was dying because I had just got married. I just had a kid. I started a whole new chapter in my life, and now here I was literally being pulled away from my body. And I figured, this is it. And all I could see about myself was that my consciousness could see this white mist, cottony looking stuff, this energy that I was in, and I could feel myself being pulled further and further away from my body, and I could see there was just the tiniest little wisp coming out of my chest. And when I turned my focus to see where I was being pulled to, there it was, the great white light, a huge white orb of pure energy, and I was connected to it, and it was pulling me into it. And then it stopped, and the energy was no longer pulling me, but it started to push me away from it, and it put me back in my body. Boy, you want to talk about visions and dreams I had during that little episode. I came to understand something, though. I came to understand what the soul is and our connection. Now, people may understand what Carillion photography is, where it was developed by a Russian scientist who had the last name Carillion, and he developed a method of photographing someone to catch the energy field coming out of their body. You know, everybody's got this different experience, and here we have in our body, what is in our body that leaks out, what is captured on Carillion photography is our soul. And that is, our body is a container for the soul. And my experiences and most other experiences of people who have near-death experiences, that we all go back to God. Everybody's experience is different, but everybody sees the great white light. So here there is intelligence, there is a brain, I won't say a brain function, but a consciousness of who you are, which is enveloped in an energy field, which is that little piece of God. It's our own divinity. It's our own personal little God particle. It is the image that we are made in. Our physical body is dictated by the planet Earth itself. We have to work within the parameters of the Earth, and indeed our DNA has all the DNA of the planet on it. So we're a perfect match. We have a perfectly designed body to function on this planet, inhabited by a spiritual soul, which is who we actually are. Now, here's another part of our own divinity. Every healthy woman is born with 400,000 eggs in her ovaries, approximately 400,000 eggs. In order for her to use all of her eggs, it would take 35,000 years, passing one a month. She would have to live 35,000 years. Men never stop making sperm until they die. So we have a reproductive system, which then gives us the other part of this prime directive where God says, let us create man in our image. And he gives so he creates the male and female, and he gives the prime directive, be fruitful, become many, and fill the planet. Have a good day. I'm out of here. It's the 7th day. I'm taking a rest. Be back in 7,000 years. You all have a good time. Shortly thereafter, the human race is kidnapped by interdimensional extraterrestrials, and the history of the Bible starts. Now we are at the end. We're at the end where this entity that we call Jesus is talked about as returning as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We already talked about several different types of entities, including the demonic forces which are here. Here's an interesting little side note. The world wants disclosure. We want to know that aliens are out there. We have the technology to do genetic engineering, and we can genetically engineer a body that can be spiritually inhabited by the soul of a Nephilim, and we can create our own alien invasion. We have the technology. Think about a million alien bodies, like Star Wars, what is it, the War of the Clones or whatever that episode is, where they've got all the clones, where they're manufacturing all these clones.
Attack of the Clones, episode 2, yeah.
There you go, Attack of the Clones. Well, here they come. We have the technology, and so we hear about all these underground bases, possible bases on the moon, possible bases on Mars.
The planet, or the race of creatures that was creating all those clones were called Caminoans. Now, in Spanish, El Camino means the way to go. So were they trying to tell us that cloning is the way to go?
Gee, you would think so. See, isn't that what science tells us? We can bioengineer your children for you, so we can get out all the bad stuff so they don't get anything like diabetes, or you don't have to worry about Down syndrome, and they're not going to be born with an extra toe. We can, design our babies. No heart conditions, no brain malfunctions. Yeah, genetically engineering our own children. You remember that song? Well, you probably don't, but there's that song back in the 70s. It came out. In the year 2525.
I've heard that song, yeah.
If man is still alive, if woman can survive. No, we're never going to make it that long under this paradigm. So we need a paradigm change. And this is what I explain in Letters to Earth. You can't survive Armageddon, because the paradigm change of Armageddon is to bring this corrupt system of evil, which is being controlled by these rebel alien life forms, which kidnapped us 6,000 years ago and have blessed the maniacal rulers of this world, who wouldn't think twice and in fact have planned snuffing out biological life on Earth. Now, that's their paradigm. The prophecies say that the King of Kings and Lord of Lords